I'm John Holl. This is Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. This week, I'm back in the greater Asheville, North Carolina area and stopping in to Zebulon Artisan Ales to talk with founder, brewer, and all-around doer, Michael Karnowski. We're going to talk about date-coding beers, history, the small brewery life, and what the future might hold. But first, I'm happy to say that NZ Hops is a proud sponsor of Drink Beer, Think Beer. Harvest has officially ended in New Zealand, and there are exciting hops to choose from, including Nelson Sauvin, Motueka, Rawaka, and the newest hop on the lineup, Nectaron. The white wine, stone fruit, and tropical fruit notes layered with pine, citrus, and herbal notes offer a range of flavors unlike any other growing region in the world. Learn more about what they can do for your beers by visiting nzhops.co.nz or finding NZ Hops on social media. We're also brought to you by Briess Malting. Briess has been malting barley for 145 years, and the fifth generation of family ownership is currently leading the company. But the values have always remained the same, producing the highest quality, most consistent malt, and working directly with their customers to help them succeed. From pilsners to porters and everything in between, Briess offers the finest handcrafted malts, extracts, and adjuncts to help you brew the perfect beer. Visit Briess.com or visit their social media channels to see and to learn more. This show is made possible by their support, and I hope you'll give them a closer look. And also, a reminder to check out beeredge.com for articles, episodes of this podcast, as well as the one hosted by Andy Crouch, and to sign up for our newsletter. Also, check out the This Week in Rauk Beer group on Facebook and follow our pages on Twitter and Instagram. And Defend Pilsner now also has a home on social media, so you can check that out and join the conversation. And you should maybe check out our merch page in the coming days for some cool stuff. You know, at least I think it's cool. That's beeredge.com/merch. And if you like the show, please remember to subscribe and to leave a review. It really does help other people find the show. So a few weeks ago, I headed down to Asheville, North Carolina for a few days to help out with photography on a new book I've been working on. And I didn't have a lot of time for social or other visits, but I made it a point to make my first stop in the state, Zebulon Artisan Ales. Mike Karnowski is the man behind the brewery. It's a small haven he started after a career brewing for others, and a career that started off running a homebrew shop. Here, he does things his way, but also with historical accuracy. Over the years, he's worked with beer historians to release period-accurate beers that really offer a snapshot in time and reveal long-forgotten flavors, and to showcase how beer has evolved. A few weeks ago on the show with M. Souter and Don Tess, we were talking about date-coding beer styles, and that's something Mike is doing. You'll even have a chance to try them for yourself soon enough, and I'll tell you more about that after the interview. We sat down in this tap room at his bar on a day when he's usually closed. It was a brew day, and he'd already been at it for hours. Here's our conversation. So we're in your brewery on a day when you're transitioning from brew days to being open for a tap room again.
Right.
It seems exhausting to sort of like living dual lives. Or a dual space, I guess.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous, really. But you know, as basically a mom and pop brewery in a 1,400 square foot building, it's the only way it can be. It has to either be a tap room or a working brewery, but it can't be both. You know, people come in on Friday and Saturday and they're like, "Why aren't you open throughout the week?" And they just don't understand that if you come in here on a Monday or Tuesday, it's just chaos. You know, there's hoses everywhere, there's tanks being cleaned, there's caustic and acid everywhere, and there's no way I can have people in here. And so it's the only way it could be, you know, unless people are always asking me, why don't you expand? Why don't you get another place? And I'm just not that kind of businessman. I've always been a mom and pop businessman. We had a homebrew shop in New Orleans for 13 years, my wife and I. And it was just her and I and no employees for 13 years, 6 days a week. And it burns you out, but once you have employees, it adds a whole level of stress and paperwork and financial burden that I'm just not willing to take on. I talked to a lot of brewers that started, my size and then expanded, and they're like, man, once you start getting the employees, everything just becomes chaotic. The bartenders are stealing from you. They're not showing up, and you're trying to, organize 3, 4, 5 employees to be there, and it's just too much. There's two types of stress. One is a stress where you have a bunch of people working for you, and the responsibility of paying them and organizing them. And there's the stress of being a one-man brewery where everything's on your shoulders. And I just decided to take that stress of being a one-man brewery and just try to keep it as small as I can to minimize the amount of stress in my life.
That's got to take like a conscious effort though to do, because in the craft beer world and the small beer world for 40 years now, it's been start small, grow big. Growth. Yeah, exactly. And so like it has to take some sort of mental commitment as well as, like personal commitment to say, okay, I'm happy with this. Like 1,400 square feet, like 2 days a week, open to the public. Like this is good for me. And I wonder how many people stop and think about like what's actually good for them as opposed to what they think the world is their definition of good for them.
Well, I don't think it's the world. I think it's their investors.
Also
I think
that,
the trouble is starting too big, where you have partners and investors, and that almost always leads to trauma later on. So I don't know. I've watched a lot of breweries follow that growth pattern, and some it works for. Like Burial, I remember when they started off with just a little 1.5 barrel system back in the day, and it was super cute and fun to go to, and they just kept parlaying that into new places, and they've grown organically, and I respect what they do, but I have no desire to do that. And I've seen a lot of breweries try to do the growth, and it ruins them. Getting second locations, third locations to try to make enough money to keep it working, and then it just all collapses. And I just think staying small is a legitimate option for a brewery. It just seems almost un-American to do so.
Yeah, and that's sort of all of the, I think, the newer generations of craft brewers, though, who came in, they saw the success of Sierra Nevada. And when you drive down to Mills River from here, it's like, holy shit, that is, that's what $1 billion can buy you. That's, and there's this sort of, American Gordon Gekko, want kind of factor. But I don't know. The brewers that I seem to talk to that seem the happiest are the ones that can see their entire business from standing in one place in their brewery, and there's a satisfaction that comes with that. It's like owning your first house and seeing your land.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of brewers who, start a brewery, and then 5 years later, they aren't brewing anymore. They've got a brewer that brews for them, and they're just kind of pushed to the back room where they're ordering and filling out invoices and things like that. And the only that just doesn't sound appealing to me at all. The only reason I opened a brewery was to have a creative outlet for me to make beer. That's first and foremost the reason I opened this. Second was to get out of a brewery that I was having a lot of personal problems with the people that worked there.
Yeah.
That's something like 90% of all people quit their jobs, not because they hate the job, it's because they hate the people that they're working with.
Yeah, I've been at places. Are there? You owned your own business beforehand, and then you went to work for other people. When you started this, it was almost, not a second career, but it was, and I hesitate to even use like third act kind of thing, because that makes you seem really old, which,
I am old, and this is probably my third and final act.
When you started this, though, did you think about how to wind it down? Or did you think about like an exit plan? Yeah. Not really. I mean, I got this place going for not a lot of money. I think a little over $100,000. Okay. And that was just my own money, no investors, no partners. So my feeling was always like, worst case scenario, I can just sell it all and make most of my money back, and I won't be, broke, or I'm not mortgaging my house.
So yeah, my exit strategy was always like, I can probably sell everything for as much as I paid for it and get out even Steven. But it was never like build it up to something that will be taken over by AB InBev and I can go, retire in Spain or something.
I guess I didn't phrase that the right way, because I was thinking more, not necessarily like building it up to get a larger paycheck, but like, is there a point that you think you would ever get to where you're like, okay, this has been fun, time to turn off the lights and walk away? Like, are there there's got to be like professional benchmarks that you want to hit so that you're not just that guy in the back room ordering stuff and pushing buttons and that kind of thing. Like, there's got to be happy pursuits. And if you get to the end of that,
yeah, I try to have projects that are meaningful to me, and those kind of keep me going through the year. I mean, we can talk about this upcoming one we've got.
I want to talk, with Ron Pattinson, the historical beers. Yeah.
But overall, it's, I definitely have gone through minor depressions owning the brewery. And I've thought a lot about getting out many times, just burned out, uninspired, really not liking the direction that craft beer is moving in. And I just, I don't know, 10 times in 5 years really thought about, why am I doing this? Why?
It's twice a year. I mean, that's not insignificant.
No, and a couple fairly deep depressions that I went in, and so the idea that this is all fun and games, it's really difficult physically, mentally, and if you talk to restaurant owners, they're going to tell you don't open a restaurant.
Yeah.
If you enjoy cooking, just cook at home. Every single restaurant owner will tell you,
yeah,
don't do it.
Yeah.
But brewers, we don't say that enough. I'm telling you, if you like home brewing, don't open a brewery. Unless you're in a small town and there is a little place you can open up to just take care of your local community, that's fine. But if you're opening up in a town that's already got 30 breweries, I mean, what are you going to bring?
Or one across the street, yeah.
It's just, it's so overcrowded, so oversaturated that the oversaturation is really what's driving a lot of the problems with craft beer right now.
That's twice that you've mentioned this now, the direction of craft beer and then the problem with craft beer right now. You have a platform. What in your mind is wrong with the industry right now, or the problem with the industry right now?
Well, I mean, it's all based on oversaturation, where there's more breweries than there are people who like craft beer. And so what they've had to do is, one, try to stand out by doing wacky, gimmicky things. Like, look at me, I threw breakfast cereal in my beer. It's like, yeah, you and everybody else. It's so tired. Even the gimmicks are tired. And then there's not that many people who really... There's not enough craft beer drinkers who really love beer to go around. So we start making beer for people who don't even like beer. We make beer for people who like juice. We make people who like candy bars. The whole thing is trying to get more people in because there's so many breweries that there's not enough people to go around. So we try to make beer for people who don't like beer. And, that seems to be some of the most... It's not all breweries are doing this, but it's enough where they are very vocal, and that's what you see on Instagram and things like that, are just these really terrible beers with like fish in it, or Old Bay seasoning, or just whatever,
Yeah.
And it's a bad direction. It's a race to the bottom for craft beer, and the main problem with that is just there's too many breweries. So that's my main beef. I don't really, people say I hate on hazy IPAs or something like that, but hazy IPAs are fine. I just don't like the myopic drinkers who only drink hazy IPA. That's all they ever drink, and there's so many. I mean, I've been brewing since 1986, and just a fan of world craft, world styles of beer. And they're all completely ignored. I mean, the most radical thing you could do right now is make a brown ale.
Yeah. An unadorned brown ale, not a brown ale with like Count Chocula.
A classic brown ale. And the public doesn't want that. They'd be like, ugh. But every brewer I know, is
Yeah,
like,
I want
that.
Yeah, yeah.
We're all nostalgic for when beer tasted like beer. I've got a vintage IPA on, which is part of this box set that we're going to talk about, and it's basically a tribute or an homage to Anchor Liberty Ale.
Okay. So it says West Coast
1974. Because that's the rebirth. That's the birth of IPA in America.
Yeah.
And every brewer I give it to is like, oh my God, this is so amazing. I'm like, it's just pale malt and Cascade hops. They're like, but it's just what I want, And so, yeah, the sad thing is, I know so many brewers, and almost all of them were making stuff we don't like, and that's a big change. 5 years ago, even.
Have you done that here? Have you made a beer have you made a style that you don't like? Or have you made something that, like, you knew going into it was going to break your soul a little bit?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, I have a series of stouts called Me and the Devil.
Okay.
And it's kind of a joke on me selling my soul.
Okay.
And we dedicate it to other people who have sold their soul. So, the first one was Robert Johnson, the blues guy who sold his soul to Crossroads.
Yeah.
And, second one was for Walt Dickinson from Wicked Weed.
Yeah.
And and the third one was for me. So
I mean, that's kind of ballsy, just given the team of lawyers that they have behind them these days. But yeah.
Yeah, bring it on. The intellectual property theft is another big problem with craft beer.
That's the one that I can't get past. Like, if you want to put 13 pounds, per barrel of,
fluff or nutter,
whatever in your beer, like, go for it. But it's the intellectual property theft that just absolutely kills me. And it's small lazy brewers that are doing it and saying, oh, we're so small, nobody's going to pay attention to us. And there's that story. I think it was a brewery in Wisconsin that got sued by Hershey because they were calling it like Milk Dud, porter or something like that, and using the Milk Duds logo.
Right.
And they're like, why are they doing this? It's like, because they're a $1 billion company that's trying to protect
their trademarks.
Yeah, their trademarks. Like, why did you do it? That's
and
the
it's
larger.
Not creative.
Yeah.
You're just stealing. So that's what a lot of breweries are. They're all making the same beer that they're stealing the idea from somebody else, using somebody else's artwork. It's just the opposite of what craft beer should be. It should be creative brewers following their own vision of what they want to bring about in the world. But instead, everybody's just aping what sells for other people, and they're not even doing their own artwork or names. It's all just pretty sad.
I imagine that there would be brewers that argue that their creativity comes from double dry hop, Citra Mosaic, whatever.
But how's it creative if it's the same thing that everybody else is doing?
Okay. No, I'm just throwing out a devil's advocate. I don't have the answers to these things. I'm just here to
I mean,
ask provocative
creativity to me
means
away. Coming up with your own ideas. If you're a musician and I'm in a cover band. And
who are you covering?
We do all kinds of classic rock stuff, but I don't consider it creative.
Right.
I consider it musical.
Yeah.
But there's no creativity. I'm playing other people's music.
Yeah.
So I have my own.
You're not rewriting the melodies. You're not reworking the lyrics.
I have my own side project I do, which is 100% my musical vision and endeavor. But the classic rock stuff, it is not creative at all. And I'm not trying to pretend it's creative. And these brewers who are just making the same beers that everybody else is making, they should not think that they're creative either. They're just aping stuff that other people have already done, and it's boring. And but the thing that the devil's advocate would say, well, it's a business and you got to make money, right?
Sure. But that's if you have multiple employees and big rent, and you have a robust 10-year plan that you're hoping to break within 5, or
right.
Where do you look for creativity? How do you impart creativity into your beers?
For one, I just mine the vast wealth of craft styles that are already out there that everyone's ignoring. Historical styles. I get a lot of inspiration from chefs.
Okay.
I need an idea, I'll just watch a couple hours of some street food videos from Indonesia, on YouTube, and just all of a sudden I'll be like, ooh, that might work. Maybe we'll do a Chiang Mai farmhouse ale, a saison based on the ingredients you would find in Thailand, and it's, or I had the idea years ago back when I was working at Green Man of this idea of a movable farmhouse brewery that would be picked up a la Wizard of Oz style, and plopped down in different parts of the world, and then you're forced to brew a farmhouse beer using whatever you can find in that location. I got the idea watching the extended version of Apocalypse Now.
Okay.
And there's a scene in there. I mean, this is an example of being inspired by things other than what other brewers are doing. I'm inspired by movies.
Yeah.
I'm inspired by chefs. And so in this, in Apocalypse Now, they are traveling upriver through Vietnam, and they come upon this little French enclave of French people, because, the French were there colonizing before we tried to go in. And there's these French people living in the middle of the Vietnamese jungle, and they're baking French bread, and they're trying to keep their, their cuisine going using what they can find in the jungle. And that kind of got me an idea of, like, what if they were Belgians, and what if they were trying to brew in the middle of the jungle?
Yeah.
And so the first time we played around was the first collab we did with Burial back when I was working with Green Man, and we did a Vietnamese or Thai farmhouse ale with like kaffir lime leaves and ginger and lemongrass and that kind of stuff. So that's just an example of where you can look to get inspiration. So
I'm not looking for you to be judge, jury, and executioner here, because but you are a thoughtful guy and you are a thoughtful brewer, and I'm so if it's a matter of, okay, I'm thinking about Indonesian street food and here are some of the flavors and how can I impart that into a beer. If a hazy IPA brewer said, okay, I really love blueberry cereal, what are the flavors of that? And then deconstructed it and found other ways to impart the flavors of that particular breakfast cereal into their beers. Would that sort of fall into a creative realm in the same way?
Yeah, I would not have a problem with that at all. If you are emulating, trying to get some flavor from your childhood by using your skills, your craft, and natural ingredients, I don't have a problem with it. I have a problem with people throwing a pallet load of blueberry cereal.
Oh, yeah. No,
that's just cheating.
Yeah, just pulling the dump truck up to the General Mills factory and being like, fill it up, it's going in the mash.
No, I'm very intrigued by beer being able to trigger memories. I think that's very intriguing. But I just don't want to do it by being blatantly obvious with what you do. There's no skill in that. There's no talent.
So that's the other fun thing, right? Flavors triggering memory. And I'm not always disappointed, but when somebody tells me exactly what's in there, like, oh, this is our peanut butter cup stout, or whatever it is, where there's no guesswork involved. Like, you can't have that brain exploration, because you read the can and it says, here's what this is. Immediately, like, there's no gratification that comes with solving the puzzle or letting your mind wander a little bit. And it's one of the reasons I like doing the other podcast, Steal This Beer, where we don't know what we're drinking, or even when I'm doing blind reviews, because like I can really spend some time trying to tease it out. Is that a conversation that you like having with drinkers of, try this, I'm not going to tell you what's in it, see where it goes? Or is that not something? Is that not as much fun?
No, I mean, that's okay. It's just on all of our bottles, we list everything that's in that goes into it, ingredient wise.
Okay.
So it'd be different. Like we did a series called Mexicana 1 through 3, and they were all beers inspired by the Mexican cuisine of different regions of Mexico. So we had like a Oaxacan dark saison with burnt tortillas.
Okay.
Cocoa nibs and like pasilla chilies, but it was all very subtle. It wasn't just in your face. It wasn't like I was throwing chimichangas into the mash.
Yeah.
This is me trying to make a delicate, interesting beer that's very complex, that makes you think, you know what? I'm thinking of mole sauce.
Yeah.
You know, I don't specifically spell it out.
Okay.
But you know, then we did a northern one with tomatillos and roasted serranos, doing kind of a chili verde, salsa verde type thing too.
How'd you compensate for the acidity in the tomatillos?
They didn't come across really that acidic. But see, that's an example of using real ingredients to get the end result, not just going straight for throwing actual food product in. Because, I mean, the FDA hammer is coming down. You know, when people start throwing fried chicken and hamburgers and things like that, the FDA is going to require nutritional labeling on that. I just don't. I think we are better off monitoring that ourselves. We do not want to get the government involved in it. And I think I'm going to be pissed off at these brewers who are going to end up bringing the FDA down on us. Because right now we're an agricultural product. We are flying under the radar for the most part. And if all of a sudden the inspection starts coming down on us really hard, we're going to all regret letting these brewers do stupid shit like throw fried chicken in their beer.
More with Mike in a moment, but first, a word from the companies and organizations that help support this work. Please give them a closer look. Briess is the original craft maltster and currently offers the broadest product line in the industry. Briess's barley is grown in the Bighorn Basin of Wyoming and Montana, where warm days, cool nights, and floodwater irrigation yield some of the highest quality barley in the U.S. And if you're thinking about beer competitions and the newly announced New Zealand Pale Ale and New Zealand IPA categories, visit NZ Hops online at nzhops.co.nz or find them on social media. There you'll learn about varieties bursting with white wine, stone fruit, tropical fruit aromas, and more. Hops from New Zealand are unlike any others found on the globe. Discover them today. And now, back to Mike Karnowski of Zebulon Artisan Ales in Weaverville, North Carolina. Last week on this podcast, which I didn't know you had this on tap, so I'm curious about it. We started talking about should beer styles be date coded, and it was with Don Tess, the Canadian writer, and M. Souter, the cartoonist and writer, and we were talking about just the nature of how beers have changed and how it's tough to you walk into a brewery these days, and an IPA could mean one of any 1,000 things.
Fruited sour.
Yeah. Here's our pastry stout. It's got hops. It's an IPA. Yeah. But that you're dating a date and place for this vintage IPA really speaks to what we were talking about. And I guess also with this historical project that you're doing, that beer styles do live within certain periods and certain dates, and evolution happens, and things change. When you're creating something like a 1974 West Coast IPA, where did your research start?
Well, the 1974 West Coast is an homage to Anchor Liberty Ale.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much research to find out it's pale malt and Cascade hops, and I know the original gravity. I know the IBUs. It's pretty easy to figure that out.
But I mean, I don't know how much Liberty has changed over the years, or if it has at all.
Well, I was using their description and recipe from those days.
Okay.
Like where then the one that's after that is a West Coast 1994.
Okay.
Which is a Pliny the Elder homage, clone, whatever. I mean, I hate to say clone, but it's based on, and that's a beer that's changed a lot too.
Yeah.
So, but I went for Vinny's his recipe from 1994 that he published. I'm not trying to copy Pliny now. I'm trying to show what the evolution of IPA and what the big deal was when Pliny came out in 94.
As somebody who brews beers from periods of time, let's talk about IPA for a second. How have you seen in what you've brewed and what you've tasted? Have you done something before 74?
Well, we're doing a 6-pack.
Okay.
And so it's starting off with an IPA from around 1840.
Okay.
And the first 4 are all Ron Pattinson recipes. So the IPA started in the mid to late 1700s, and they were always barrel aged for a full year before they were even put on the ship to go. So they'd be a year and a half old by the time they made it to India. So very unlike a modern IPA, and it's aged with Brettanomyces in the oak barrel for a full year. It's a huge amount of hops, 160 IBUs of Goldings.
Wow! All right,
and so that's how IPA starts off, and it's fun to have something that intense and that crazy. It's almost hard to wrap your modern beer drinking mind around, this style of beer. It's so challenging and so interesting and so anti-modern. And then we're going to follow it as the world changes, through world wars, through inventions of different malts and laws that were passed. Like in England in 1880, they passed the Free Mash Tun Act, which before that it was only malt. You were only allowed to use malt. And after 1880, they were allowed to use flaked corn, flaked barley. They were 1840, they were allowed to use sugars. So a lot of so a beer like an IPA changes every time one of these things happens. So a lot of the fun of drinking along with, say, Ron Pattinson giving a lecture is you have in one hand a pre-World War I IPA, and in your other hand you've got a post-World War I IPA, and you can literally taste the difference from the same brewery.
Yeah.
And it's just such a fun way to learn history and to see how styles evolve. Because like you were saying, if somebody wants to know what was an old porter like,
yeah,
you got like, well, what are you talking about? Are you talking 1700s, 1800s, 1850s, 1900s, 1950s? They're all very different from one another. But that's, I think, the fun is learning about that. It's sad to me that when you look on social media and people who are trying to educate people about beer are really mocked and looked down on. I mean, you've seen the memes.
Yeah.
What's the worst possible the way of catching COVID or something, or the least way is to start talking about the history of IPA because they turn away and walk off. And it wasn't that long. It was 5 years ago where brewers were literally talking about educating the public.
Yeah.
But now the public hates to be educated. They do not want to be schooled or to be educated on the history of beer, on the different styles.
But it's hard though to do that because for the 20 plus years that I've been drinking now, like I came up on Sierra Pale and some of the other like Fuller's ESB and things like where I've been able to see the evolution of the last 20 years and taste the evolution. So now when I talk to 21-year-olds who only understand tropical juice haze, like they don't understand bitterness, and it's a tough thing. I mean, you can still go buy Sierra Pale, but it's a tough thing to sort of convince them to go backwards, to do, which is why I like this project that you're doing, because you can actually taste through the decades and taste through the time and actually see the evolution. But the education component has just gotten so much more difficult in the last couple of years, and I don't.
It's almost like it's going along with like anti-intellectualism, where, and I can understand people just like, I like what I like, and I don't, you don't need to tell me about it. I don't know. I think you're missing out on a lot of the history of beer, the old styles, it's a world of beer out there, and just to see it all focused on hazy IPAs and pastry stouts, it's just sad, at least to me.
Sure.
But if people enjoy it, they enjoy it. What do I care? I mean, I'm not. I know it comes across like I'm. Can I say shitting?
Sure. Yeah. No, you can. Yeah.
I'm not shitting on breweries that are doing that if that's what they really enjoy, or if they have a lot of employees and they need to pay those employees, and that's what they need to do. They need to sell what sells. But I think we can all agree as beer lovers that it's just seeing a small sliver of the entire beer world and the beer culture that exists out there. And you see it with Untapped ratings. Pilsner.
Yeah.
It's a lager. I don't like lagers. 2 stars.
Well, and that's
subtlety and finesse just don't seem to exist anymore.
No, and that's where a lot of the education comes from. If somebody walks in and they're looking at the board and then they're looking at your phone and then they're looking at the board and they're like, oh, a Keller Pils only has 2 stars because the Wicked Weed set just came through or whatever. It's that's going to influence their decision as opposed to just being experimental and being adventurous. That was when I first started drinking. Like, that was sort of the fun thing, was going to bottle shops and just picking up bombers and not knowing anything about them and being like, let's open it and take some notes and find out what it was. And it was a Russian roulette of sorts of sometimes you got something that was really terrible to your palate, but you still got to taste it as well. Here, I don't even know if drinkers have the chance to do that.
Yeah, I think Untapped has been really bad for craft beer.
I have not yet met a brewer who's like, I think it's the best thing that's happened. I think it's been a game changer for the positive. I've not met a single brewer who has said that.
I don't look at it. Years and years go by. I pay no attention to it. People come in like, is this the beer that's on Untapped? I'm like, I don't know. I don't.
Maybe.
Please don't review it. I don't care. It's just, and
do you want people to review your beers? Do you want people to? You want people to taste it, and drink it, obviously.
Yeah, they can review it if they want. It's just, but I think Untapped works as a record-keeping device of beers you have had.
Yeah.
For your own personal use, so you can go back and find out. But it's become this thing where bottle shops won't buy a beer if it's only got like 2 ratings of 2 stars, but the people might not have even liked that style. It doesn't mean it's not a fantastic beer, but they'll be like, oh, there's only 2 reviews, it's 2 stars, it's probably not going to sell well.
Yeah, and that's where the beer buyers are getting their information from as well. And it's the snake eating its tail kind of thing. I want to get back to historical styles because we can beat up on Untapped all day long, but it's fun. But when you chart the way that IPA flavors have evolved, and I'll use that word evolution, but is it brewer preferences? Is it consumer preferences? Is it advancements in technology and ingredients, methods, a combination of all of it? Is there, as you think about like what has led to IPAs being what they are now versus 94 versus 74 versus the 1800s, what has helped or created that change?
Well, the new hop varieties were a big part of it. I think if we didn't have New Zealand hops or these tropical hops, and we were all still using, piney citrus, then I don't know if the hazy fad would have taken over quite so much. Because I don't think the hazy wouldn't work so much with just a big pine note. It's all about trying to make it like juice. And whether that's for the drinkers or for the brewers, I think there's definitely a movement towards sweetness. And you see it in a lot of things. You see it in winemaking. Winemakers are complaining that they just want these big, juicy, sweet. The consumers just want these big, like, Apothic Red or these terrible wines that are just so sweet and fat. You see it in food. And maybe maybe it's Freudian or Jungian. Maybe it's a reversion to our childhoods.
Yeah.
Maybe we're all so stressed out and we all want to go back to the womb, so to speak. But we're with the breakfast cereals and all that stuff. It does seem very childlike. That maybe psychologically you could just explain it that we're reverting back to simpler times and simpler flavors. Because bitterness is a very adult flavor.
Yes,
and
it takes time. You have to become acclimated to it,
right?
Yeah, or accepting of it.
And so maybe if bitterness is being pushed away, we're pushing away, adulthood in some sort of fashion. But I was listening to I think it was Ron or Martin Cornell talking about the invention of glass, cheap glassware, in the mid 1800s. and how that really pushed the light lagers, the light clear beers that were becoming really popular at that time. And before that, people were using just stone mugs, and nobody could see what you were drinking.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, people could see what you were drinking, and you wanted them to see that you were drinking the new hip stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that happened with Instagram. I think all of a sudden, everybody can see what you're drinking, and you want to be showing them that you're drinking this new hip hazy. I don't think without Instagram, hazy IPAs would have taken off as much as they had.
I've heard Garrett Oliver say the same thing. Yeah, I agree with that. It's become such the visual medium, and people. I mean, you must see it when people roll up in here, and the first thing they're doing is taking out their phones to take a picture of the beer.
Yeah.
Even before they taste it, probably.
I just try not to pay attention to that. It's really if people want to do that, that's fine. I don't think they should. It's up to me to tell them not to do it. But I'm old school. I think beer is meant to be just enjoyed, and not overly thought about, not overly documented. But whatever. I don't care. I mean, that's the beauty of being so tiny like this. All I need is 1% of the beer drinking population to be fine.
Yeah.
And I've got that. I mean, we're packed in here every day we're open. So I can't complain. It's not like I'm complaining because nobody's showing up here to drink my,
Yeah, you're not sitting here alone just cursing the wind.
No. Yeah. And I make hazy IPAs sometimes because I'm not against them, and they're kind of fun to make.
What's your approach when you're making a hazy IPA?
I don't overcomplicate it. I remember 7-8 years ago when it first started coming out, I did a little lecture for the local homebrew club on how to brew hazy IPAs because they were brand new.
Yeah,
this is back when they were throwing apple puree and stuff in it to get the haze and flour.
I remember flour. I don't remember apple puree.
It was something to get the polyphenols and the tannins out of the apple. But I realize that, that's completely unnecessary. It's the hop polyphenols that come out of solution that give you the haze. So all I do is I just make 100% Maris Otter base malt, and then no hops throughout the boil. And then when I turn the heat off, I throw 3 pounds per barrel. If you're a home brewer, it's half a pound for a 6-gallon batch at Whirlpool. And then for dry hop, I throw another half a pound per 5 gallons of dry hops in there. And it ends up just completely murky and hazy. But it's very simple. There's no real secrets to making hazy IPA. I think for a while it was very mysterious. And oh my God, you've got to be a great brewer to make a hazy. It's so easy, and so I don't see brewers should not be patting themselves on the back for making a hazy IPA. It's one of the simplest beers to make.
Is there?
It all depends if you have a good hop contract.
Well, that's probably key. What's the mark of a good beer for you that you've made? I by and large, brewers are a lot like writers, where we're never actually, always happy with what we do, and we're our own toughest critics. Have there been beers that you've made over the years that you've been like, this is exactly what I want it to be, and you could go to sleep happy that night?
Yeah, sure. Just most of the pale ales, stouts, porters, just the regular beer styles we have on, I think are delicious and almost perfect, and I'd be happy drinking those without thinking about them too much. But often, I don't drink a lot of my own beer, at least not while I taste it and I sample it the whole time while I'm brewing it and bottling it, and then make sure it's good in the bottles to be released. But then after that, I don't really think about it that much. I might go back every 6 months and open one up just to see how it's aging.
Yeah,
but I try to tell people it's like David Lynch doesn't go back and watch his old movies.
Yeah.
Neil Young isn't going back and listening to his old albums. For one, because you just can't enjoy it.
Yeah.
You put so much of yourself into it. That just the only thing you're going to be able to do is look for bad things in it. And that's no way to enjoy a beer. It's just looking for faults, wishing you had done something maybe a little different, or maybe this hop would be better than that hop. And it's just no fun. That's not good beer drinking for me is just analyzation, and hypercritical about things. So I don't really drink a lot of my beer. I mean, I make a Pilsner for the local bar here called the Whale.
Okay.
And it's just a beautiful, German-style Pilsner. And I always try to keep a keg of that at my house because I can drink it. It's doesn't require thinking.
Yeah.
I might be like, maybe some Hallertauer instead of the Tantnang or something. But it doesn't stop me from just being able to sit there and drink
you can
a couple half liters and enjoying it.
That sounds about right. Do you have a good chiropractor?
Dude, I've got an appointment coming up. My back is fucked.
When you have home brewers that you talk to who come in, and even back, in the day, the physical toll of this job does not get talked about nearly enough. And I've told the story in the past where after AB bought Goose, I was out with one of their brewers, and it was about a year after the sale. And I said, well, what's the biggest difference? And don't give me that whole, bullshit, everything's the same in corporate kind of thing. And he says, my back doesn't hurt anymore. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, we had these 3 steps where we had to carry, the 50-pound sacks of, whatever, up to the brew deck. AB came in with their efficiency experts. They saw what we were happening, and now I have like a pallet jack that, gets it up there for me, so my back doesn't hurt anymore. And like that was his biggest thing. He's like, I'm going home happier. I'm feeling great. And I was like, all right, like that's a net positive. But there's a physical toll.
Yeah, it's really a young man's game for sure. I mean, I'm 54, and I got to start thinking about some sort of exit strategy, or getting somebody in here to be an assistant brewer, because you don't see
now that you've said this
on
on the radio, man, you're going to start getting resumes and flowers in the mail.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is I want to pay somebody well.
Okay.
I don't.
That's the other important thing that people don't talk
getting
about.
Somebody $12 an hour to do stuff. I mean, we even pay our bartenders like $20 an hour plus tips, just because we want somebody good. We want somebody who knows the beer, so we're willing to pay. And I would want to have a good brewer, and I'd want to pay him, 30, 40 grand. And there's just that money isn't here in this little brewery to make that happen. So I don't know what I'm going to do. But, you don't see 60-year-old guys up on the brew deck. Not in a small brewery like this where you're all, there's no mechanization going on here.
Yeah, those 4 steps those can be brutal. That can be Everest.
But, to tell you the truth, I never throw out my back or hurt myself actually working at the brewery. I'm sure I'm damaging it, and then I always throw it out, sneezing or picking up a sock off the bathroom floor or something. But it's because my body's so just, out of whack and destroyed from brewing that these little things throw it out. But it's probably because, when I'm at work, I'm consciously, lifting with my legs. I'm consciously, standing up straight when I'm going to do something. And then when I get home, I'm more just kind of like, do-do-do, and that's when you mess things up. So I don't know. We'll see what the future holds. Like Jim Morrison said, the future's uncertain. The end is always near.
I think that's a good place to leave it. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Yeah, appreciate it. My thanks to Mike for the hospitality and the history lesson. As promised, if you'd like a chance to taste some history, he'll be releasing a box set of 6 500-milliliter bottles following the evolution of IPA from 1800 to 2000. It's a companion for an upcoming streaming lecture featuring Ron Pattinson and Mitch Steele. The beer is going to be available at the beginning of July, and you can follow the brewery's social media. You should be already, but follow their channels and check their pages for release info. And speaking of cool things, you should also check out the This Week in Rauk Beer page on Facebook and our handles on Twitter and Instagram, as well as Defend Pilsner. It now has its own pages on as well, and you can get to them through beeredge.com. If you have suggestions, and there's been some cool ones that have come in lately, so thanks for that, you can email me at John Holl, it's JOHNHOLL, at beeredge.com, or you can talk to me on Twitter at John_Holl. And please make sure you're subscribed to the show and leave a review if you're so inclined. If you'd like to learn about advertising and supporting independent journalism, please contact Liz Melby. She's on email at liz@beeredge.com. And speaking of that, NZ Hops is a proud sponsor of Drink Beer, Think Beer. Harvest has officially ended in New Zealand, and there are exciting hops to choose from, including Nelson Sauvin, Motueka, Ruaka, and the newest hop in the lineup, Nectaron. The white wine, stone fruit, and tropical fruit notes, layered with pine, citrus, and herbal notes, offer a range of flavors unlike any other growing region in the world. Learn more about what they can do for your beers by visiting nzhops.co.nz or finding NZ Hops on social media. We're also brought to you by Briess Malting. Briess has been malting barley for 145 years, and the fifth generation of family ownership is currently leading the company. But the values have always remained the same, producing the highest quality, most consistent malt, and working directly with their customers to help them succeed. From pilsners to porters and everything in between, Briess offers the finest handcrafted malts, extracts, and adjuncts to help you brew the perfect beer. Visit Briess.com or visit their social media channels to see and to learn more. This show is made possible by their support, and I really hope that you will give them a closer look. Be sure to listen in to Steal This Beer every Monday, the BYO Nano podcast on the 15th of every month, and the Beer Edge podcast with Andy Crouch. Nate Weber provided the theme music. Jeff Quinn made our logo. Remember to defend Pilsner. I'm John Holl, recording again this week from North Carolina. New episodes of this show release every Wednesday, and that's when I'm going to be back again to drink beer and to think beer.